Shalom, shalom, Mishpacha Wahabarim. Once again, it's your sister Ashanti in the building, back again with another live lesson. I am also known as 916 Sean Sean here on the YouTube and on the Facebook. I am Shanti Doc. My email is duccndodge1 That's duckandodge1 Today's lesson is the second part in a series. It's called Yahweh is Head of Household, looking at first century household codes, Paul and first century household codes. This is part two. And a couple of days ago, we did part one where we were talking about how the first century AD context is very important. Knowing concepts such as Shalom, Eliyah Israel. Knowing concepts such as honor versus shame, patronage, client, kinship, and head of household. Those concepts are good to know when you're trying to understand the first century AD, especially Paul's epistles, Paul's letters in the Bible. Like I said, I was inspired to do this series for a number of reasons, and one of the reasons is the young Israelite sister was murdered last weekend, allegedly by a 47-year-old guy she was supposedly married to, and I presume not legally married. She was only 19 years old. Her name is Luana Sneed, only 19. So I send condolences out once again and prayers to her family that they can get some comfort and solace and some resolve in this whole matter and situation. And the reason why I was inspired to do this lesson for that reason is because when you come into this Israelite walk of faith, you get people, sometimes some brothers, not all the brothers, and some sisters, not all of the sisters, but some, you get them pushing a dogma or a doctrine that says, a man has this lordship, power, control, domination, or a woman, and she is supposed to submit blindly to everything he says and does. She's supposed to be obedient like a dog. She's just supposed to give him sex, submission, and silence. And when we serve the Most High Yahweh Elohim, we do not see that from the text. However, some people are trying to push this scripture or this text. They're trying to push the idea that Yahweh Elohim is this type of Elohim power or deity that suppresses women, that calls women inferior, and that is far from the truth. And we want to make sure we bring out proper historical context to enlighten the people, to those who have ears to hear, to understand proper rendering of Paul's letters. There is no misogyny in the scripture. Paul or Shaul was teaching against misogyny. When Paul was bringing the Gentile converts into the belief of YHWH as the father of the household, if you will, he was explaining to them that Yahweh is the head of household, and we're going to talk about definitely more of what that means. We did talk about it last week, but Paul was telling the Gentile converts that when you come into this walk, when you come into this faith, the social constructs of your land, that is not how the Most High Yahweh operates. The Most High Yahweh is loving, compassionate, and very gracious and merciful, right? The way the Most High treats you, the way the Most High delivers you and comforts you and loves you is not the Roman imperial hierarchy, right? So, with that being said, I have a couple of guests here again. I got Brother B.A. and Sister Yahara. I'll let them formally introduce themselves, and we'll dive right into this thing. We'll pick up where we left off in the last video, and I apologize about the last video cutting off and cutting out. But we'll go into 1 Timothy 5, and then we'll go into Ephesians 2, and then we'll get into some historical renderings and backdrops. So with that being said, I'm going to let my sister Yahara go first and formally introduce herself.
Shalom, shalom. Good evening, everyone. All praise to the Most High for blessing us with another day, definitely. I'm ready for another edifying lesson. And I pray that this brings edification to the body, because this is some great information coming out and helps us to get a better understanding of what Paul was talking about. And he was addressing, you have to take in consideration of the time frame that they're in and everything as to what he was speaking about. So this is going to be a good lesson. Absolutely. And thank you, sis, for taking the time out to do the work to bring everything together, because it has to start somewhere. For you to be the advocate to do such, putting in the hard work, it's much appreciated. Blessings.
I'm sincerely humbled by your kind words. I'm just out here trying to be an obedient vessel to the Most High Yahweh because I love Yahweh and I love Yahweh's people. All praise to the Most High Yahweh for the attitude and the mindset to have the Most High's will above my will. So thank you for joining in, sis. I'm glad you were edified by the last video and the documentation and the articles that I was bringing out and reading. This should be good this time around. So um, strap in the seat belt, right? But as always, we love your input as we go along in this video, and your questions or your comments, right? So next we have you know the infamous beat to the Izzy, brother B.A. Ben Abraham. Hammer and sickle. MC Hammer and sickle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yo, what's the word? All praises due to the Most High God. In the name of His only anointed, you guys know His name, known as the Christ. Uh, Most definitely is for those who are listening, those who claim to look at things from a Torah perspective. This most definitely will. This historical information and research will help you understand what Paul was dealing with, because it's commonly taught that Paul did away with Torah. He wasn't keeping Torah. And the reason why a lot of Christians would say that, because they're either being very dishonest or they don't have a clue about what Paul was talking about when it comes to dealing with the civil laws of the land in the region where Paul was teaching at, in Corinth and Ephesus and Thessalonica and the various other schools or churches he taught in. So once you guys soak this information, look it up for yourself, take it back to your Christian partners. Take it back to those who ride the church fathers real heavy. Throw this in their faces and see what they have to say. With that being said, go ahead, sis.
Hallelujah. Y'all know how I do. The greeting is first and foremost. Ko tehalim, ko kabo, wahatiferet le Yahweh, abinu Eloheinu. And that is all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, our Father, our Elohim, right? And ditto to everything Brother BA said. Everything that we present here, we would believe this to provoke you to take this back, pray on it, meditate on it, take it to the Most High Yahweh. Ask for the Holy Spirit to lead and guide you into all truth, a sound conclusion, right? And may the information that is brought out be edifying and edifying to the point where you can actually apply it in your everyday walking journey, right? May this challenge your heart, your soul, your mind, your spirit, right? Okay, so um, a couple of days ago, we left off talking about head of household, Paterfamilias. We learned that Paterfamilias was more so an estate owner, right? An estate owner. And it meant that uh, anyone in the household, such as a wife, depending on what kind of contracted marriage she had, children, grandchildren, and slaves were all a part of this head of household estate, right? Estate owner, property owner. And that meant that the materials, the property, the assets that the people under the male head of household would be his legal responsibility, accountability, right? So it had to do with your monetary possessions or your material possessions, your assets, things that you were, legally liable to be responsible for and handle, right? So that was the Paterfamilias. So we looked at a few articles by Richard Soller, and we looked at the Oxford Dictionary, the Oxford Biblical Dictionary, and we saw that a woman could also be a paterfamilias. So that took me to a segue to look in 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 14. And I believe 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 14, some things are overlooked when we examine this passage, this text. So I'm going to read it in the English first, and then I'm going to show you in the Greek what it is, and we're going to see what Paul was actually saying. Sometimes you have to go into concordances and lexicons to actually get the definition of words, the proper definition of words. And majority of the time, when I'm looking for the Greek first century AD definitions of words, I go to this lexicon right here. This is an intermediate Greek English lexicon, founded upon the seventh edition of Liddell and Scott's Greek English lexicon, right? Liddell and Scott's Greek English lexicon. Let me do something real quick. Let me get my I'm gonna get my camera to stop focusing in and out real quick, and then I'll continue to read. So we're gonna go to 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 14. Yeah, you got your sword on you? If not, I'll go ahead and read. But you can read that in English if you got your sword on you, and then I'm gonna read it in the Greek, and then translate in the Greek, and we're gonna look at a certain word in that text.
If not, I already got mine open too, sis.
Okay, go ahead, Sister Yahara.
All right, 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 14. I will therefore that the younger women marry, bear children, guide the house, give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully.
All right. So what version of the scriptures were you reading from, sis?
This is the King James version Bible that I do have.
Okay, so you read from the King James version, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm going to share the screen and then read this, and hopefully this does not mess up. It shouldn't. All right. Good. So this is from SBL Greek New Testament. SBL means Society for Biblical Literature. Um, I actually purchased this. I believe it's in my book bag. I don't have it out, but you can get this from. You can download this on my sword app. All right. So let's read it in the Greek. This is 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 14, and we're going to pay attention to a word. When Sister Yahara read 1 Timothy 5:14 in the English translation, she said a phrase, "Guide the house." We're going to look at what guide the house is. All right. So says bulamai un neoteras. So that is I prefer then neoteras is younger ones, the younger the youth. Gamein to marry. Teknaganein to bear children. Oika despotain to guide the house. Medamian afar men. So medamian is no one afar main occasion. The danai to give, to antike meno, the adversary, not giving occasion to the adversary. Loidarias, reviling or slandering. Karin, grace, right? Now we want to focus on this word right here. Oikadespotain. Now this is the infinitive. It means to do something. Like you have the word like to study, to run, to jog, um, to swim. It has the word to in front of it. When you see the three letters at the end of the word, looks like an E, looks like an I, and then looks like a V. Well, that's actually E, I, and a n, 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 like an N sound, right? So this is oikadespotain. This is Omicron, Iota, Kappa, Omicron, Delta, Epsilon, Sigma, Pi, Omicron, Tau, right? Epsilon, Iota, Nu. Look at this word. Guide the house. It's translated as guide the house. But look over here. These are right here the uppercase letters of Greek. And that's the root word for oikadespotain. And that is rendered here as oiko or okai, excuse me, oika despoteo. Oika despoteo. Now you see the different letters here at the end. You have an epsilon, you have a omega at the end, right? So the in the Greek grammar, they have different case endings to let you know what type of word it is and who's doing the word at a particular time. Sometimes with when there's an action, it'll tell you what type of action is going on, right? So look at what it says here. Oikadespateo, to be master of a house or head of a family. Oikadespotain means in 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 14 to be master of a house or head of a family. So when someone says, well, only the male is the head of the house. Only the male is the head of the household. Well, what does Paul actually say? So, Sister Yahara, could you do me a favor and read 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 14 again, and this time for the word oikadespotain, read the rendering that we have here from 1st century AD definition.
Okay. Let's see. So we have, I will therefore that the younger women marry, bear children, to be master of a house or to rule a household or manage family affairs, and give none occasion to the adversary to speak reproachfully.
Right. So we're proving from the text what the text actually says about what Paul conveyed in a message to women. Right?
And I just read the G from on the Strong's Concordance, the G3616, both 1 and 2 of the definitions used to be master or the head of household, to rule a household, or to manage family affairs.
Yeah.
And that's the Strong's G3616. So
Right.
okay.
Any comments or concerns from anybody they want to say before I move on?
I had to step away for a second.
Yes.
So is this the part? Is this where in Timothy, where we dig into where we understand the position of the woman, right?
Correct. We
Well,
just go ahead, yeah.
well, we could assume that we understand why most individuals who read a KJV don't like to use a concordance, because what you guys just broke, you guys went underneath the surface and you looked up a certain word that changes the whole game. Now you
Right.
just broke a whole bunch of doctrine, because a lot of brothers will run here and try to flip it to make it say something else. But now what you did, you went into the original Greek. You went into the papyrus. And I've always said this, if we're going to believe this text to be valid 100%, we have to look at it through the eyes of the writers. And what did the writers say? But what these guys will do, they'll play a game of semantics and say, well, um, they won't say this verbatim, but the logic is the translator knew better than the writer. Like, wow, that's backwards. That makes no sense. And people like that, we can no longer waste our time with. Just get the dirt off your shoulders and pray for them and move on. But go ahead, sis.
Right. All right.
Doesn't that,
Oh,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
really quickly, my bad. Really quickly, but doesn't that sound like if you bring that context out and you go back to Proverbs 31 and off of 16 when it says that she considereth a field and buy it, and the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. It describes the characteristics of a virtuous woman, and she does all these things to keep her house. So I mean, what is the need for her to do all of this if she wasn't able to function as a leader of a household?
Well, I wouldn't say leader of a household.
Well, not
Notice
leader,
I'm not.
not leader, so to speak, in the context that everybody thinks of it as, but
Okay.
as opposed to being able to assist or
Acquire
help
some
with,
property. She has the
yeah,
rights to acquire property and be an estate
absolutely,
owner. If Proverbs
absolutely,
31 says she goes out and purchases a field, that means she was working, got her own money, right?
absolutely. So she'll be able to do the paterfamilias, be that
Paterfamilias.
paterfamilias, excuse me, definitely.
And the thing
To
is that what you're saying is even the term paterfamilias is not commonly taught. But as you can see, this society that we live in, we're still under that way of thinking, that way of rule. Uh, so now that we're bringing this into perspective, we're exposing how society is ran. And we know the American culture is pretty much the granddaughter of Rome. And we see where we get our ways from. And now all of a sudden, this provokes or this challenges the Hellenized Hebrew to really wake up and come back to Torah like he's always claiming that he's keeping. Praise the Most High God. And I thank you, too, for doing this. Most definitely. All I got to do is sit back and listen, just chime in. Y'all keep going.
absolutely, I agree, because I mean, it makes you definitely, you think you're awake, and then you open up your eyes and see that hey, you know what, I've been in a dream within a dream, because you know what, I'm shaking the dust off now, and I'm just like, wait, I'm still under Romanistic the same thing that's been going on. I've still been in this constant regurgitated archaic Romanistic thinking frame of thinking, because we're still doing the same things.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Functioning in the ways we've been assimilated in, and
mm-hmm,
it's going to take more than knowing you're an Israelite now
absolutely.
to be in this walk. There's some actions that you have to do. And first thing you got to do is be willing to tear off the old man. Be willing to be the clay that you are, be broken down so that you can be all the way built back up.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, absolutely. Boot training, come on, boot camp.
Right, right, absolutely. And so we're talking about the first century household codes here, and what Paul was teaching. And Paul, when he was in Asia Minor, what's called modern day Turkey right now, you have the cities that he went to and helped facilitate and build these congregation or these assemblies. These were Gentile converts coming over into the covenant fold of Israel through belief in Yeshua HaMashiach, Yeshua the Messiah, or Jesus the Christ. And so in these lands, these were Roman colonial lands. What I mean by that is these were lands who were ran by Rome. You have cities such as Galatia, Corinth, Thessalonica, Ephesus, Colossae. Um, what else? Macedonia. Um, a few others, of Philippi, right? You have Paul or Shaul going into these lands where if they're under Roman colonial rule, then they have law codes of the land that they have to adhere to. Just like over here in America, okay, we are Israel. We are those who strive, wrestle, prevail, and rule with Elohim, right? We follow the written Torah. However, we also have to follow the laws of the land of America and follow the laws of the land of each state that we reside in, right? So, Paul, when he went to these lands, he's talking to a people in their language, with the idioms, phrases, and euphemisms, and and cultural context that they know, the vernacular that they're familiar with, the terms and terminology that they're familiar with. He's talking to them that way so that they can understand the concept that they have they already have a grasp on a certain type of concept. However, he's using that concept they understand to teach them that Yahweh is actually the paterfamilias or head of household, and that the kingdom is now the house of the most high Yahweh, and that the tyrannical oppression, the certain ways of the laws of the land that they have to live by and navigate through are a total 180 when they come over into the household of Yahweh, come over into this Israelite faith, this Israelite walk. It's a total 180 from the laws of the land that they have to adhere to. However, you don't want to um, break the laws of the land while trying to be an obedient vessel of the Most High Yahweh once you're adopted into this family of the household of Yahweh, right? So I want to read a passage or have someone read a passage from Ephesians chapter 2, right? Ephesians chapter 2. Um, but first, let me read this here. So either BA or Sister Yahara, after I read a certain verse, I want you to go to Ephesians chapter 2, and you're going to start reading at verses 13 um, all the way down to verse 19. But let me read Ephesians chapter 1, verse 1 first, just for some context. And I'm reading from the scriptures ISR. It says, Shaul, an emissary or an apostle of Yeshua Messiah, by the desire of Elohim, to the set apart ones or holy ones who are in Ephesus and true to Messiah Yeshua. So this is Paul in Ephesus. So he's talking to Ephesians. So Ephesus is a Roman colonial land. They're under the law of the land while trying to actually follow the written laws of Torah, right? And if you know anything about Ephesus, uh just like Corinth, they have a lot of sexual immorality going on. They have a lot of idol worship going on, a lot of mother goddess worship prevalent over there in that area at this time, right? And you have a lot of Gentiles, a lot of the people of the nations, their neighbors. Um, their neighbors are, living under Roman law, and sometimes, your neighbors can pick on you when you start to do things different from them because now, as a convert, you're no longer a Gentile. And Gentile, Ryan White puts it best. He says, Gentile means someone other than us. Someone other than us is defined as somebody totally on the opposite end of what we do, right? And so we're believers. And so believers would not be called Gentiles once they're believers. All right. So uh, Paul in Ephesus, he was telling these converts who came over into the way, hey, now that you're doing things a little bit different, These are your, your rights and your privileges now that you're coming into the covenant of the Most High Yahweh through Yeshua Messiah, right? So he's going to talk to them in the language that they understand, the vernacular that they will understand. So either Sister Yahara or BA, can somebody read Ephesians chapter 2, verses 13 to verse 19?
All right. What I want to do, I'm reading from the Greek interlinear version. So what I'm gonna do, it reads a little different from the ISR, and it reads very different from the King James. So what I most definitely would like to do after I'm done reading it, I would like to. I don't have my King James on me. Maybe we can get Sister Yara to read verses 14 from the King James version, just to see here how different it sounds from the other translations we're reading from. If she doesn't mind, if not, I can pull mine out real quick. Uh, verse 13. But now in Christ, you who once were far off have been brought near by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace. In his flesh he has made both groups into one, and has broken down the dividing wall, that is the hostility between us. He has abolished the law with its commandments and ordinances, that he might create in himself one new humanity in place of two, thus making peace, and might reconcile both groups to God in one body through the cross, thus putting to death that hostility through it. So he came and proclaimed peace to you who were far off, and peace to those who were near. For through him both of us have access in one spirit to the Father. So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are citizens with the saints and also members of the household of Elohim.
Praise be to the Most High, BA. You want to elaborate on anything before I do about what you just read, or go ahead?
As you can see, the language that Paul is using, he's talking to the people, to the Ephesians. This is language that they're very familiar with. So let's go back to verse 17. So he came and proclaimed peace to you who were far off, and peace to those who were near. So those who are far off are the heathen, the nations, the Gentiles. They were far off. And those who were near, those are the bloodline of Jacob. But let's keep going. For through him, both of us have access in one spirit to the Father. So then you are no longer strangers and aliens, but you are citizens with the saints and also members of the household of God. Because we got to remember, back in this time, there were household codes. So now all of a sudden he's using this language, this dialect that only these people who are living in these regions would understand.
Come on, that's right. That's right.
So I just wanted to point that out, because now all of a sudden this information that Sister Ashanti is showing you, it lines up with what Paul was dealing with from a social perspective. It's very important as we read the text or the letters of Paul that we get very familiar with things from a social view. No more dogma. No more battling and debating over what is and what isn't. We have to look at things from a social perspective of what was going on locally where Paul was teaching at. And the commentaries and the articles and all the information that Shanti's bringing out to you line up with what was going on, and it makes much more sense when he talks about, or when Paul says, you are members of the household of God. Now, I just want to say this one real quick. Yahara, when you get a chance, can you read verses 14 and 15 from the KJV real quick?
Okay. Verse 14, chapter 2 of Ephesians. For he is our peace, who hath made both one, and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace.
I just want to say this: the the enmity. He said, let me read 15. He has abolished the law with its commandments, and the King James says enmity. Now, Ashanti, you're pretty familiar with this. What enmity do you think he was talking about?
The enmity that Paul was talking about was what's known as traditions of men, what the Pharisee type schools of thought were teaching during Yeshua's time and at this time. And that's dogma. Dogma, enmity, or hate. The hate that you're saying, oh, you Gentile, you can't get into the kingdom. That's dogma. That's enmity. Oh, Gentile, in order for you to get into the kingdom, you got to get circumcised. And we know from when Abraham got circumcised, he was circumcised as a sign after he was obedient to the Most High, and then went out and left his father's household, left the land, right? So it was a sign of the covenant after, and the Most High counted Abraham's obedience as righteousness before Abraham got circumcised. So the enmity or dogma that the Judaizers were doing, or the Pharisees at this time were doing, is telling people in order to get into the kingdom, our social club is the it factor right now. We determine our way is that our way says you get into the kingdom by circumcising your flesh, and that's how you get into the kingdom. That's how you get saved. That's dogma. That's enmity.
So the theologians of Christendom would say that's talking about the Torah. There's nothing in the Torah that creates enmity between Jew and Gentile, or Israelite or foreigner or stranger. Because we read the Torah commands Israel to have love for the stranger and to bring them into the fold, and they also have access to the covenant. How are you a light to the nations? How are you supposed to be a light to the nations? That's the thing the Christian, either they're being dishonest about, or they just don't know what they're talking about. But Paul was very, very clear. Very clear. The ordinances, these little rules, the little rules of politics that was going on between the Judaizers, those who were deep in Judaism, or those who were, or in other words, as Ryan White would explain, he also said that the Judaizers were all people, the Jews were also called Jews because they lived in a certain region. So now all of a sudden we have people who most definitely were making up rules as they went along, and they were playing the game against the Gentiles, making these people think that they got to go through all these other obstacles just to get into the kingdom of heaven, when we can read the Torah itself, where it tells and where it says for what are the requirements to get into the kingdom, or what are the requirements to come upon the covenant. It's not that difficult. You just be obedient, you adhere to the law, statutes, and commandments, and have mercy on those, and so forth. But I just wanted to point that out real quick. That was it.
Yeah, the traditions of men are what's known as the oral law, or the Mishnah in the Talmud, right? I got some notes here. Uh, we're not going to get intricately detailed in the enmity or dogma today. We're going to save that for another lesson. I just want to give a couple of references as to where in the Mishnah Talmud that the rabbis and sages of that time were saying that the Gentiles cannot come into the kingdom unless they circumcise their flesh. So what the Judaizers or Pharisees of that time were doing is setting a standard according to them, according to men, not according to Yahweh, but according to men, that circumcision became what's called a Judean identity marker. They were saying in order to be us, in order to be children of the Most High, you had to have this identity marker such as circumcision. When entrance into the kingdom, or what gave you your identity as being a child of the Most High Yahweh, was obedience in action to what Yahweh said do, or what to Yahweh said not to do. Right. So these are some references here where the Gentiles were pretty much told that they couldn't get into the kingdom. The Babylonian Talmud Hagigah 13a, Sanhedrin 59a, and Bava Kama Mishnah section 4.3. Right. So we'll deep dive into that in another lesson. But this is called household of God. This is called Yahweh is the head of household, and this is the household of Elohim, or Yahweh Elohim, that Paul is trying to establish for the converts coming into the fold. So, anybody want to say something else before I move forward?
Just real quick, when it comes to the Talmud, Kabbalah, and the Mishnah, for those who may be interested in finding out or looking into that more deeply, Ashanti and myself, we have a teaching on that, and it's called Yeshua's Jesus' confrontation with the first century rabbis on Debate Talk for You. You can go there and you can look it up, and we break into it, and most high willing, we'll bring out some more information. But that first video that we did was most definitely powerful. Check out Sal's Showtime on Debate Talk for You. It's right there for you. Go ahead, sis.
All right. So, in the New Testament, of course, of Ephesians, what we just read, you have Colossians, you have First Peter. Those are the main areas where there are these what's called household codes or household tables, and these are instructions that go all the way back to Aristotle. Aristotle is one of those Greek philosophers, right? Um, there's certain things also in First Timothy, a little bit in Titus, and we'll go through those as this series goes along. So this is going to be an extended amount of videos in a series, hopefully not more than about 4 or 5, right? Okay, so let's see here. Um, the biblical image of the household of God. There's an author named William Gaither from 1970. He wrote this song called Family of God. I'm going to read it here. It says, you will notice we say brother and sister round here. It's because we're a family and these are so near. When one has a heartache, we all share the tears and rejoice in each victory in this family so dear. And this is the chorus. I'm so glad I'm a part of the family of God. I've been washed in the fountain, cleansed by his blood. Joint heirs with Jesus as we travel this sod, for I'm a part of the family of God. So notice that a lot of time in the text, especially in the New Testament, we're calling Yahweh or God the Father. And we're called children of the Father. And as children of the Father, we call each other brother and sister. And this is a family, right? This is the family of Yahweh. And the family of Yahweh, we make up this house. A house is not necessarily 4 walls with a roof. It's us. We have our father. We're children. And as children, we're brothers and sisters. Um, Back to Paul. Paul had this idea of koinonia or fellowship, right? And fellowship is not necessarily just eating and sitting around drinking, but it's what holds you together, what gives you that relation to one another, right? How you bond with one another. And There's a rediscovery that needs to be made between what house is defined as in the Bible in the Hebrew, the bayit, and then the Greek oikos, and then Latin domus, right? And so what we want to not do is take our 20 or 21st century AD mindset and superimpose it on a text that's, when it comes to Paul's letters, first century AD context. That's not what we want to do. In order to understand the epistles, we have to go into the first century concept, language, social, political, cultural realm that they understood in that time. So the other video we talked about Paterfamilias, right? The male householder or the head of household, and we understood that to be an estate owner, right? That was brought up in Rome about 450 BCE in what's called the 12 tables or the Roman law codes, right? And so when Yeshua came on the scene, this is what was being implemented in the land, right? When Israelites were around, they were pretty much under Roman colonial rule, even though they could do the written Torah, but they were in agreements with Rome to be allowed to adhere to their faith and do the things of the written Torah, right? Um, Let me show you this. Okay, I'm trying to get to where I want to read from here. I'm taking a lot of this information from a website called Cruise Chronicle, right? Cruise Chronicle. Um, I didn't input that into the description box, but I'll put that in um, later. All right, all right. So let's see.
What I got from that, sis, was there when I
Go
was
ahead.
reading through that article, was that it was considered honorable back then to stand forth and I guess there was somebody from the Yahudim then that had did an honorable act or a favor, if you will. And correct me if I'm wrong. I was reading through it, and so someone of that was Roman had honored that favor, so to speak, or that honorable act that he had did in protecting him.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, I know there's a lot to cover in this thing, but you talking about honor versus shame area, or are you talking about patronage and client, so to speak?
The patronage, and because it was I was reading everything through and I was trying to see where it led into where the Yahudim were allowed to practice their worship and to the Most High, and while this era was going on. And
Right.
that's what I actually, when they were actually allowed to worship and do their practices and within the land. So that's what I was going through.
Right. There was an agreement that the Yahudim had with the Romans that they could practice worship of their deity Yahweh while in Judea, because Judea was under Roman colonialism. Yes, that's what you're referring to, right?
Yes, that's what that.
Oh,
Yeah, exactly.
okay. So um let me do this.
I don't want to jump ahead, so
Sorry.
I don't want to jump ahead or anything like that. So
Oh
Tell
no,
us.
it's all good. It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Hey, we covering a lot, but you know, wherever the Most High leads you you know, to jump into a subject, go ahead, and you know, of course, I'll go ahead and bring us back, and make sure we have a flow that we can all
Absolutely.
get in line with. So no problem.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's talk about what is a family. So a family, when we think of family, we think of somebody like we're biologically related to. And so um we're biologically related to people. We have these emotional ties, emotional bonds. But in the Greco-Roman world, this is a foreign idea or a concept. Shalom, Sister Tammy. Shalom. Thanks for tuning in. And family, as a historian Hellerman, is about patrilineal kinship groups. So patrilineal, what patriarchy actually is, pretty much is that the lineage is passed through the male. You pretty much you are determined. Um, you are determined. Your lineage or nationality is determined from the seed or your father line. Your that's patriarchy foundational, right? That's patriarchy foundational. So the uh, the author here is saying that honor, when we talk about honor versus shame, um, honor is brought to the father through the son, because the son actually would carry the seed to continue the nationality or the lineage or the bloodline, the kinship line, right? And so watch this. Um, there's a Greek philosopher named Demosthenes in the 4th century BCE. Um, he wrote, um, we have courtesans for our pleasure, prostitutes for daily physical use, and wives to bring up legitimate children and to be faithful stewards in household matters. Right. So why did I jump to that? It's because in what's constituted as a family in the Greco-Roman mindset, you have marriage. It's a legal contract between two families, not just the individuals getting married, but it's a contract between the two families, right? And you have to understand the role of women, of how the role of women was looked at to the Romans, right? So that's why that Greek philosopher in the 4th century BCE wrote about the women. Like, you know, uh, we got women who are our wives just to bring up the children, right? We got courtesans for pleasure. Courtesans are high class, like what you call them, escorts, and prostitutes, right? So during the years of the Roman Republic, a woman was said to pass from under the hand of her father to being under the hand of her husband. So by the time that Jesus roamed the earth, a woman would more likely feel a primary allegiance to her father's family than her husband's. And of course, you know, definitely if she had a marriage contract called a manus, then she would be um, more under the hand of her husband, so to speak, as the paterfamilias, or head of household, right? Um, according to Roman laws, Roman citizens, they were the only ones who could marry, and slaves cannot marry, but they lived with the family, right? And the relationship between spouses or between parents and children don't carry the same emotional content. And so the only close, tight knit bond that was emotional between biological relatives in this family, right, um, were between siblings, and in particular, brothers. And that's why you hear Paul talking about brethren, brothers and sisters, brethren. And so it is presumed that your brothers and sisters, since they're so close and so emotionally tied, they are of one mind and of a unified accord with each other, right? And that's why sometimes the siblings get into what, a conflict, or what we call a rivalry, right? a rivalry. So the metaphor that Paul Shaul uses to symbolize the relationship that believers now have in Yeshua toward one another, right? They're called the brethren. And so the assembly of the Most High Yahweh is a fictive family, or a family made up but not of biological people, right? So it's a fictive family. And now Paul is saying that Yahweh is the Paterfamilias, right? And that we are the children, brothers and sisters of this Paterfamilias, or head of household, or estate owner, right? Um, there was a social class. There was they have a social hierarchy, and I know BA knows more about this, but a social hierarchy to where there's called a caste system, CASTE, where you have like upper class, middle class, lower class. Well, they had that in first century AD Roman colonial lands, and they had this social hierarchy that says, okay, since I'm upper class, I'm above you, I'm superior, I'm higher than you. Um, the person who's second or next is beneath me. They're lower. They're inferior. They're not as significant or important. Things of that nature. So there was a social system, and your social status was very prevalent, and it was highly regarded in that time, right? So there's this thing called patronage and a client system. So a patron would actually, give these favors um, to their clients, and the patrons would give favors, or what you call grace to their clients, and the clients would say, oh, okay, well, since this patron has done so much for me, given gifts upon me, bestowed blessings upon me, then I'm going to be forever indebted to this patron or whatever. And so this patron would receive this high honor for doing these favors or giving grace to these clients, right? And so this was the social status or climate or strata back in that day. And so the way you moved up in class or rank, or moved up in the caste system, was not through your achievements and accomplishments. It was about who you knew, right? It was about who you knew. And so these people were gaining positions of being a patron, not by their deeds, um, not by their accomplishments, not by the achievements, but you're gaining this position based on how many favors you could do for somebody. And this was the first we see here about competition, right? It's competition. And so status was very important. How somebody looked at you, how somebody viewed you, how somebody honored you, was very important and prevalent in that time. It was all about one-upmanship and showmanship. Um, how somebody what am I trying to say? How somebody how somebody viewed you, or what somebody's opinion was of you, then that was highly honored, right? They were people pleasers back in that day, right? People pleasers. And so like I said, the patrons, they gave gifts and did favors, right? And they gave these favors to the clients, and sometimes they knew the clients couldn't repay them. And so if a client couldn't repay you, it keeps that client coming back and say, "Oh, you blessed me. I've got this favor or grace that was unmerited. I don't deserve it. So I always have to serve you. Right?" And that's what was going on in that time. So we're talking about the concepts of honor versus shame. We're talking about the concepts of patronage and the client system. And so this is all going to play a part in this series, right? of Yahweh as head of household and the household codes. But you have to get some cultural backdrop understanding of the mind frame, the social climate, the political climate of of how these people function and operated on a day-to-day basis, right? And so with the patron and the client, they had this what's David De Silva, um, an accredited source. He's a Ashton. He's a professor at Ashton of New Testament and Greek, and I've been paying attention to a lot of what he's rendered. I'll give the book um, source that I've been going into, but he calls this patronage client system as a dance of it's a dance of grace, the grace dance, right? So it was about the giving done by the patron, the thankfulness of the client for receiving the patron's gift, and the unreserved devotion in response to the client to the patron. And so grace, favor. We think this is just a biblical term, but this is not necessarily a biblical term. It's a common Greek term, right? So Paul, of course, he's using a common Greek term and using it to get people to understand now that when you're coming into the household of Yahweh, Yahweh would be the patron, you would be the client. However, you as the client would not be forced into giving devotion. It's a choice that you have, right? And that choice you have is dependent upon faith, right? So faith is the state of mind of the client who is confident that their patron will provide for them, and the reciprocal need for the client to be faithful in his or her actions. That's why we say of the Most High Yahweh, He is faithful and just to forgive us of all unrighteousness, cleanse us. He is faithful to do what He says He's going to do: provide, protect, nurture, and be that life-giving source, right? So the social status, the social hierarchy created that the pyramid, right? So more into the status game. It says in the Roman world there were two classes of people called the upper class and lower class. And lower class was made up of everybody else, right? Doesn't that sound familiar, right? And there's another class which was equestrian. Equestrian class was um, the next to the lower class, right? And I know if you're not familiar with the word equestrian, it has something to do with horses, right? And so it says horse-mounted soldiers with the means to own and provide for their horses and armaments were welcomed into this order, the equestrian class, right? So this is just a couple of examples of the class or caste system that is here in the early first century AD Roman colonial lands, right? So you got like wealthy freeborn citizen. Under that, you might have imperial slave. Under that, you may have poor freed citizen, and then a freed non-citizen slave, and then an urban domestic slave, and then a mining slave, and all this stuff, right? All right. So age and sex figured into the calculation as well as who went into this caste system. So you were in this caste system pretty much from birth. When you were birthed into the world, whomever your mother or your father was, you would automatically be put into a certain area of this hierarchy, right? Um, and this hierarchy went like this: it was an adult male with no living father, adult male with a living father, then a widowed adult female with independent resources, then a widowed adult female, then a married adult female, then the male child, then the female child, right? And so what I mean by hierarchy, social hierarchy, is they seen that this caste system pit people into I'm better than you, I'm more significant or important than you. I have more prestige than you. I have more power than you. And if I'm at the top, if I'm at the height, then that means I'm the most powerful, and everybody else under me is just insignificant, inferior, and of the lowest class. And you're basically looked at as just like dirt, right? So the status game in the Greco-Roman world is very complex. Um, and in today's time, over here in America, we tend to focus on economics, like um, your wealth or your riches or your money or your materials, right? We tend to see that as being sort of a social hierarchy here, right? But the Romans, what they did was integrated certain things in this status game, this social hierarchical system, which such as social class and family line, status with a patron, wealth controlled, age and gender, and the moral character and achievement. And so, a slave, if you were a slave, it was impossible for you, being at the bottom, to have a high social status, um, because maybe your master was not at this highest social status in other people's eyes, in the community's eyes, in the people's eyes of the land that you lived in. All right, and status was very important again, right? So talk a little bit about honor versus shame. Before I talk about honor and shame, and I think this is what Sister Yahara was alluding to a little bit. um, Anybody have any questions, concerns, or comments before I move into a little bit about honor and shame?
Good to go over here.
All right. So, in the Greco-Roman world and in the ancient Near East, I always get tongue-tied when I see that. So, in the ancient Near East, the idea of honor and the counterpart shame is at the center of the life, right? So, the Greek philosophers, they were telling people to do that which is noble and honorable, and opposite of that was disgraceful and shameful, right? And so honor is what's called a relational concept. And like, when we talk about honor, we look at ourselves as like when we, like this past year, when you graduate, with high honors, you might have graduated with a 3.5 or a 4.0, and you get all these awards or certificates or accolades and things of that nature, right? And so um, we do what's honorable in the eyes of the people around us, our communities. Then we increase what we call our solidarity with that community, and that strengthens the values that we have, right, concerning what's honorable. And so in return, the community says, "Oh, look, this person's honorable. Susie or Sally or Jesse, they won this award. They got a 3.5. They got all A's when they graduated, and now, they have a scholarship to Stanford University, and they have a full academic ride to have their tuition, room and board, and books paid for, right? That's honorable to the community, right? So shame comes from exhibiting qualities that are opposite, that don't match the image of what our community wants portrayed. And so failures um, to do what's honorable in the community's eyes lead to what's called shunning. And so um, in the West, it's difficult for us to appreciate the concept of honor and shame. We more so have like this concept of guiltiness versus innocence, right? And so in the group in Rome, well, in our world, we think that if we fall out of grace or favor with a group, then we join another. And if we fall out of grace or favor with a group, we won't be seen as popular. We won't be seen as the it crowd. We won't be seen as factors, so to speak, in our vernacular, right? We won't be seen as somebody, right? And so honor and shame, that concept was institutionalized in the Greco-Roman world. And so Greeks and Romans, they had an extensive amount of rituals of honor related to like qualities such as age, class, that patron-client relationship, the other things such as like God worship or the gods they worshipped, right? And speaking of gods they worship, the Paterfamilias, or the head of household, how the Greeks and Romans looked at it, um, since that male was the head of household, they would say, okay, everyone in that house had to do their obeisance, do their allegiance, and worship to the gods that the male head of household chose, right? And that was considered honorable as well, right? So there was a social order that you had to acknowledge, and it was honorable to adhere to that social order, that social hierarchy, right? And if you did this, you failed the whole community, right? And so in the Greco-Roman world, the religion, there was no distinction between state and religion, right? Right? And so what did I just say before? The Roman law of the land said, okay, the male of the household, the paterfamilias, you are assigned the gods to worship, and everyone in your household are to worship the gods that you worship. These were state approved gods, right? This is why Paul had to go on trial in Acts chapter 17, because he was bringing unknown God to the Gentile nations, and quote unquote, Paul had to get him approved first, right? Right? Because the social order of that time said, hey, these are the gods of the land, these are the approved gods for worship. Paul, who's this other homeboy you talking about bringing up in here? It's causing a disruption to what we deem honorable as a society and as a community, right? Um, Now remember what I was saying about the graduation ceremony. In a graduation ceremony, the graduates wear a robe and a cap, and that cap, right, is put on the head with that tassel, right? I still got my tassel. I don't know if y'all got y'all tassels. I still got my tassel, right? And so that hat was a symbol of honor, of great achievement, right? So it's put on your head. And when I got my cap, I designed it. I put some art on it. I had a computer on it, and it has, I pretty much decked it out, right? And so um, the fact that the head is the most distinguished part of the body, right? That's often in the Greco-Roman world used as a proxy for the entire body. So it's a symbolic representation of your whole being. Physical head is a representation of your whole being. So the culture of honor and shame, to honor the head, was to honor symbolically the whole unit. And to dishonor the head was to dishonor the whole unit. Now I'm giving you a glimpse of 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3. It's got to do with honor and shame according to the Roman law of the land, of what they sought as being a graceful thing in their community at that time, right? So, any questions, comments, or concerns before I go into some more information here? Sister Yahara, Brother B.A.
I'm just letting it flow, sis. It's It's pertinent information. It's really good. So I'm loving it. And it's just flowing just right. It's lining up with scripture. So I mean, I'm loving it.
Right.
It gives a better
Hallelujah.
understanding.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Brother B to the is a. You got anything to say?
I had to step away for a second. My apologies.
Oh, no problem. No problem. I know it's Sunday, fun day. You know what I mean? Before we get to Monday. So I understand. All right. So we almost finished. So let's talk about something else. And the first video I was saying that Rome, there was a Republican democracy there in their government, and they, that has its roots in Greek culture, a Republican democracy, right? And so during the years of the Roman Republic, remember I said from the 6th century to the 1st century BCE, the ability of senators um, to maintain their order, it started to deteriorate. And there were some revolts going on because people were lobbying for power, you know. Now, this is where we start talking about power, control, authority, and lordship and all that. Pay attention. So, there was an open civil war that broke out in 49 BCE. And Julius Caesar emerged as the victor, and he was named dictator for life over the newly united and expanded empire. And so he used his power um, to consolidate the bureaucracy, but he was assassinated in 44 BCE, right? In 44 BCE, that's when Corinth became a city again. They were um, they were burned down and ransacked by Rome in 146 BCE, and then they built it back up. So in Rome, I mean, Rome built up Corinth. And so in 146 BC, Corinth was a Greek city. But now, as we get to 44 BCE, then it becomes a Roman um, colonized city, right? And Julius Caesar, he was assassinated by the senators. Um, they wanted to restore some government to Republican operations, right? But 2 years after his death, they declared Julius Caesar Divus Lullius a divine being. That means a divine worshipped being. And this is where you start to get your imperial cult from or emperor worship from, right? And so Julius Caesar's adopted son, named Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus, so Gaius Octavianus, he inherited the title of Caesar and his father's wealth, right? And so he then spent the next 15 years, he developed this hierarchy that was personally loyal to him, and he wanted to eliminate all the rest of his opponents, in this hierarchy here, this social hierarchy that deemed him as father, right? So check this out. If his father was Divius Lullius, and then so Gaius Octavianus was called the son of God. He was called Divi Filius. Filius is the son of the child. He was called the son of God in the Roman lands. And so this is what the people said about him. They said um, that he brought the empire under his authority, and he returned the control of the empire back to the Senate in 27 BCE. They will call him the son of God. And so they gave him the title of Augustus. It's a religious term, and that indicated authority. That's where you start to get your authority from, right? So at this point on, Augustus Caesar, who's Gaius Octavianus, he continued to solidify his control of the empire, and so peace and tranquility prevailed throughout the empire under his 41-year rule, and it ended in 14 AD, right? So he was still alive when Yeshua came in the flesh onto the earth. So it was commonly proclaimed that this Augustus right? Gaius Octavianus was the son of God and brought the good news, the gospel of peace and tranquility to the whole world. So now you see why Paul had to write these letters. Well, one of the reasons why Paul had to write these letters to these Gentile people who were coming over into the ways of the Most High, they were converting, right? And if the law of the land considered um, Augustus Caesar, Gaius Octavianus, to be the son of God, well, then who are you, Paul, talking about Jesus is the son of God? Who are you, Paul, talking about Yeshua is the son of God to bring the good news, peace, and tranquility?
Mm, mm.
Shalom, Shika. What's happening? All right. So, so Augustus, he lifted up this model of the household as his model for the empire. And the Roman Empire became what? A macrocosm with Augustus as the Paterfamilias, head of household of the empire, and all the status pyramids or that social hierarchy of honor, it culminated in him. Um, some more historians, Osik and Balk, Oisk and Balch, they write this structured domestic household code had its origin in Aristotle, but the ethic was reinforced by the Emperor Augustus. So watch this. According to Dio Cassius, Octavian called on his soldiers to conquer and rule all mankind, to allow no woman to make herself equal to a man. The Stoic philosopher Arius Didymus drew up a summary of Aristotle's politics, and if you want the link to look at these politics, I can give that to you, right? And so the Stoic philosopher he drew up a summary of Aristotle's politics for the household ethics and these household codes, and it argues that a male, has the rule of his household by nature, for the deliberative faculty in a woman is inferior. In children, it does not yet exist. And in the case of slaves, it was completely absent. So, competition, hierarchy, and patriarchy of Roman imperial society were internalized by individual persons and groups. So, patriarchy had infused in it this hierarchy, this lordship, this authoritarianism, right? Um, this rulership thing, this domination and power thing. Rome Rome incorporated that into patriarchy when patriarchy was just alone how you determine your nationality or your lineage. Let me continue. And then we're going to wrap it up after this, right? We're going to wrap it up after this. And then we'll continue in some more stuff in the series, right? And so the entire empire was transformed into a big patron client pyramid with Caesar at the top or the height as paterfamilias head of household. And now you see head of household, it went from being what you call an estate owner, somebody who was legally liable and accountable and responsible for the material property or the assets of the people in the house. It went from being just that to now Augustus Caesar, Octavianus, now he's incorporating in in the head of household this lordship, rulership, authority, power, status structure. He's also infusing that into patriarchy, right? So religion, of course, was in play at this time in the Roman lands. It's good to see you too, Sister Sheik. Hope you enjoying the lesson, and you can go back to the beginning and catch it from there and let me know what you think. And so the emperor cult worship began in this time in the eastern part. It was prior to Augustus, right? It was prior to Augustus, right? Because Augustus Caesar or Octavian, right? When did he come on the scene? When his father died, right? So he came in the AD. This was happening 27 BCE, before Messiah Yeshua roamed the earth. Emperor cult worship began already. Emperor cult worship was um, a human being, man, and sometimes their family. Sometimes they were living, sometimes they were dead, and the Roman citizens had to actually worship these people as gods, and they would have to offer up to these people as gods these gifts, these sacrifices, and things of that nature. And so, right, there's this thing of worshiping people or rulers as what Augustus was as gods, right? And so the western part of the empire, they seized upon this idea called genius. Genius. I know we say, oh, he's a genius, she's a genius. They're bright, they're intellectual, they're they have high IQ, they're very smart. We call that person a genius. Well, the Romans, genius was a divine spirit that presided over his life and from where his power emanated from. Right? So within the household, the Romans frequently burned incense to the genius of the Paterfamilias, or the male head of household. And Augustus, he suggested that emperor cult worship was actually just worshiping his genius, not him personally. Right? That's what he was saying. And so the emperor was expected to be worshipped by all the people in that land. They were to worship him as God. But there was one exception, and I believe this is what Sister Kirsten was alluding to. So during a battle of Alexandria, between 48 to 47 BCE, Julius Caesar's forces became trapped in the city, and the leader of the client state of Judea, right, Antipater, he came to Caesar's rescue. And so out of gratitude, right, out of gratitude, Antipater now is that client, and Julius Caesar would become that patron, right? So out of gratitude, Jews were granted religious freedoms, freedom from military service, serving in the Roman army, and the right to maintain the temple, the second temple that was still standing at that time before it came down in 70 AD. So the Jews, they were exempted from worship of the emperor and from pagan rituals wherever they were in the empire. And so this exemption extended to believers in Yeshua Messiah as long as they were seen as a Jewish sect, which they were up until the 60s, 70s AD. And I'm going to add to that. So the Romans considered any convert to the ways, laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High Yahweh, the Romans were considering them to be Jewish or Judeans because they took on their customs. Now, Orthodox, or the natural lineage Jews, they did not see the converts as Judeans just because they took on the ways. Right? So, for example, if you go into the land of Israel right now, the 1948 Israel, if you go over there to the Orthodox, the ultra Orthodox, and people of the like, if you tell them you observe Torah, and you start going in the elevator or driving in a car, they be like, you don't follow no Torah. You're not a Judean or Judaios according to them. But according to a person of Rome, you would be considered a Jew because you took on the ways of Israel. You took on the law, statutes, and commandments of Israel, no matter your original nationality, that you were a Gentile. If they saw you as a convert, which means you start practicing these customs of Israel, they called you a Jew. You were considered a Jew. And that's why we have Acts 18, where who is that? Who sent the Jews out? Let's see. Um, so I'm forgetting Claudius. Claudius, remember Claudius in 49 AD said, "Get up out of here, you converts. Get up out of here, you Jews. You Jews are considered you converts are considered Jews to us, right?" So let me continue, and then we're gonna wrap it up. So of the leaders such as Paul, you know, Barnabas, Peter, they were aware of the resentment they would have from the people who still roamed in the Roman lands, because now you're not doing what we do. We can't relate to you anymore. We're not friends, we're not partners, we're not buddies no more, because you don't go to places that you used to go with us. You don't do the things that you used to do with us. You don't worship the gods that we worshipped anymore. Now you over here talking about you worship the one and only true Elohim. And so now you have this faction of what's called the way, believers in Yeshua, the Messiah, who follow the written Torah, right? And so they were, sometimes disturbing the land. They were disturbing the social culture and hierarchy of the land. Not only them, but you had ISIS worship going on. You had the mystery cults going on that were appealing to women as well, going on, right? So this is what you call um, antisocial behavior. Antisocial behavior, you don't do what the community deems honorable. You don't do what's normal to us. You don't do what we do, which makes us a people, which makes us a nation. So we're looking at you as outsiders, right? So with that being said, I'm gonna end this video here, and with we'll pick back up with comparing the 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 Roman household to the household of God, in that what was established in ancient Israel to be a house was a total 180 from what the Romans understood to be a house, right? So with that being said, any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead, BA, Yahara, bring it in before we wrap it on up.
Yes, I have a question for you personally, actually. Would you, with this newfound information, would you continue to say that Paul's letters were hard to understand? That's my question to you.
For me personally, they're not hard to understand because I've willingly, objectively opened my mind up to studying first century secular historical documentation that we're doing right now, looking at the social, political, economic climate, looking at the culture, looking at the community and their mindset and their mind frame in that day. They're hard to understand. Paul's letters are hard to understand for people who prefer to keep their dogma, for people who prefer to keep their pet doctrine, for people whose things they've been brought up here with in America want to hold on to because it's a convenience for them, because it's comfortable for them, because it pleases their flesh, because they're emotionally tied to it. Paul's letters are going to be hard for people like that to understand.
Awesome. That's
I'll
it for
ask the
me.
same.
That was
I'll
make
ask
a
the same.
beautiful breakdown. Beautiful breakdown.
I'll ask the same question to you. Go ahead. What, the same question. Do you think, with this information so far, because this is only the second part in a series that we're doing, do you think Paul's letters are hard to understand?
When you put everything in its proper context and you understand and you open up your mind, as you said, if in piggybacking on that, if you take in consideration the time that we were in, everything that we are addressing, from social, everything from what everything was going on then at that time frame. I mean, he had to address so many different things. And I believe that it's to me, it's not confusing anymore when you understand what was going on in that time frame, when you understand the many different laws that were being implicated on the people, the many different what was governing around them. It's easy to understand and put into context. It's easy. So to me, it's not confusing. It's just having the mindset of where we are now, and having appreciation and patience of what was going on then. It's just doing your work. That's all. So That's my opinion. It's not confusing to me now.
Right. Yeah, it's not confusing now. And I praise the Most High Yahweh that vessels were obedient to Him and recording this research, this history, so we can get our hands on it. You know. Mind of Joshua, Shalom. Mind of Joshua. Are you a woman or a man? I want to make sure I'm respectful in calling you, or referring to you as you are. I want to be totally respectful, but great question. What are my thoughts on the early pre-Nicene Christians or church? Did they keep Torah? Did they keep the written Torah? The leaders who knew the apostles personally and were appointed to head the churches by them, like Polycarp, Justin Martyr, Ignatius, etc. They seem to be hostile towards Jews. Yes, Justin Martyr, Ignatius, Polycarp. Well, Polycarp, he wasn't so much hostile. He actually was saying during the first century AD, or early second century AD, he was saying that we're supposed to still be keeping Pesach or Passover, right? Um, so Ignatius, Justin Martyr, um, Tertullian, um, 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 people like that, they were hostile toward the Jews, bloodline Jews, and the Jews who were converts. They were hostile towards them because look at what we brought out as far as what the social structured hierarchy mind frame was back in that time. You had these people who were influenced by the Greco philosophy, Aristotle and Plutarch. You know, um, the people who were converting over into the Most High Yahweh's law, statutes, and commandments, according to Acts 15, yeah, they had like four things to start out with. However, they were already keeping Shabbat. That's why they were there in the first place, to get that beginning instruction. And so by them keeping Shabbat already, getting that instruction, what was going to keep happening was Moshe, the law of Moses, was going to keep being read. And as you keep getting that read to you, you start to understand what you need to do, or in what instructions you need to follow in order to be in the house of the Most High Yahweh. If you're a child in your mother and father house, guess what? You're going to obey their instructions and their rules and their teachings. That's what the law is. That's what the law of Moshe is. So they kept Torah. They started keeping those four things first, not to eat meat with the blood and things of that nature. And then as they kept reading, or having the law of Moses read to them, they would start discovering what other things they needed to start making adjustments to, right? So a lot of people in Rome, yes, they hated the Jews and the converts, and they probably also hated the Judaizers, who were like Pharisaical in their school or mind frame of thought, who were pushing to keep the oral law as well as the written law, right? That's what they were pushing. So um yeah, the church fathers, you can actually go into some historical reference about the church fathers at www.ccel.org. CCEL, it stands for Christian Classic Ethereal Library. And you can go in and get these people's takes on their dogma, right? Their dogma. And so what I'll say is this, to wrap up the answer to your question. Um, After the Bar Kokhba revolt, what was that, between 132 AD and 135 AD? Um, there's a saying: if you can't beat them, join them. And so after these revolts, after Hadrian did this revolt, right? Um, a lot of the hate a lot of the hate of what you call modern day Christians. You know, those people you name, the Tertullians, the Ignatius. Um, they started pretty much aligning themselves with the Roman senators, governors, and people, to the point where they were saying, okay, well, you know what? We're going to say that these Jews are detestable, and we're going to talk about that this doctrine that they're coming with is a heresy, right? You can't beat them, join them. So we're going to say that this is a heresy. We're going to say that Sabbath is something detestable. We're going to make sure that we separate from these people, because if Roman citizens are declaring that we're Jews, when we're, because we're converting over the ways to the ways of the Most High Yahweh. If we're converting over to the ways of the Most High Yahweh, if that's a stipulation for us to get kicked out, well, then we're going to start compromising. Well, we don't want to be seen as these people so that we can stay in the land. So now we're going to say that Sunday is our day of rest. We're now going to say that we can eat anything we want to, right? We're now going to say that we don't got to keep any of these feast days that we see in Leviticus 23. It's a compromise. Um, you can actually see some of that information I'm bringing out from Samuel Bacciocchi. Samuel Bacciocchi. Let me see if I can find it here. Um, when I find that, I'll upload it in the description box. But it's some information that Samuel Bacciocchi put out about um, Rome, the Roman citizens, the senators, the proconsuls, and the Claudiuses of that time, right? So it's, oh, okay, well, 132 to 135 AD, after the Bar Kokhba revolt, it's like, oh, okay, well, we're starting to change our mindset and our mind frame about converting over into the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High, because we don't want to face the persecution from the people we're actually biologically related to. We don't want to face the persecution. So, so I hope that answers the question, but I'll definitely put that reference up in the description box, and you can read that for yourself. It actually gives more historical insight about where this veil starts to get put back up between what's now modern day Christians and Jews who believe in Yeshua as Messiah. So in Rome, I would be considered a Jew. I'm a Jew anyway because of my heritage and nationality. I'm Israel because I wrestle, strive, prevail, and rule with Elohim. That's what Israel means. And a point of fact, by the way, we talk about bloodline so much. Bloodline is not a definite to get you into the kingdom. Salvation is a gift. It's a favor. It's grace. Abraham was from the land of the Chaldeans. Who are the Chaldeans? They were from the land of Babylon. So Abraham has like Babylonian blood. So we talk about a pure bloodline. I think that's I don't think that's a good idea to talk about. Well, our blood is supreme, is superior, it surpasses all. The father of our faith, Abraham, got Babylonian blood. See what this is about here? This is about following the Most High and being totally obedient. That's what makes you a part of His household. That's why Yahweh is the head of household, and that's why we are the children, brothers and sisters. So, anything else?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Anything else you want to say, Brother BA, before I wrap this up? Great question, Mind of Joshua, and hope you join us again for the next part in the series. Hope you go back and watch part 1. And may you be edified. May you continue to be uplifted, encouraged, and built up. again, this series is not about woman trying to one up man. Um, this is not about man over woman. This is about restoring proper balance. And I know some people are going to say, "Oh, Shanti, you're a feminist." Well, feminist means feminist means you want a woman to have the right to go to work, and when she works, have the right to get the same pay as the job title states. You know, if a woman and a man go out to be a nurse, for example, and the pay per hour for a nurse is $30 an hour. Well, if the bottom line pay for being a nurse is $30 an hour, well, the woman should not get paid $25 an hour, and excuse me, the woman should not get paid $25 an hour, and the man get paid $30 an hour, right? Feminism does not mean a woman is trying to rule over a man. Feminism does not mean a woman hates man. Feminism does not mean a woman trying to do everything a man can do. No, we have wombs here for women, and then, males have what they have. We understand that. We understand there's natural roles, but don't try to incorporate certain social hierarchical material into these natural roles, as that's what this information is about, right? Feminism is not about no woman hating no man and trying to rule. If you look at Genesis 1, Adam was a male and female pair. They're supposed to rule together. They're supposed to rule together over the birds of the air, the fish of
Mhm.
the sea, the animals on the land, and the creeping things creeping around on the earth.
Equal heirs.
Equal heirs,
Yeah,
joint heirs.
doing
Yes.
heirs. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely.
Hallelujah.
Absolutely.
Hallelujah.
But not one time, sis, did I hear you say anything about man ruling over woman. Nothing like none of that. I didn't hear it one time. One time.
Because it's not there. And as we continue to go through this series, I'm going to keep giving substantial evidence that leader, ruler, or authority has nothing to do with head. 20 or 21st century AD mindset was not here in the first century AD mindset.
All
Period.
right.
Yeah. So, BA, you got anything to add before we end it? B to the is A, or he might have had to step up with A again.
But again,
Sister Yahara,
thank
yeah,
you. Thank you. For
you
thank you. It's been a blessing to be a part of something so phenomenal, so phenomenal. Absolutely. And like I told you before, like I got my I got my front row seat because it is phenomenal because the information is there, and if you are so comfortable sitting in within yourself knowing that there's something could be deeper, that there, like, you're not just comfortable. This is information. Let those that have an ear hear. This is information for those who are not okay with just settling for surface level information. So I really appreciate you taking the time and away from your husband, just to put one and two together. It takes a lot. It takes time. It takes patience to read through all this literature. So I, for one, will say it first. I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking that time. I appreciate you allowing the Most High to use you to bring edification to the body again. I mean, because this is pertinent information, and not a lot of people are gonna want to hear this. But again, let those who have an ear hear. This is for those. So, Torah Rabbah, definitely.
and Torah Baba Uncle Yahara for coming on. I am humbled. Um, as a vessel, just allowed by the Most High Yahweh, to come across um, these pertinent details to help us comprehend Paul's epistles a little bit better, so that the fighting, fussing, bickering back and forth can start to cease. And this is for those who have an ear to hear. Um, Thank you for coming on. Brother Eliyahu Israel, praise the Most High. Um, and you're welcome for this understanding that was brought. Hope you continue to join in on the other videos that we'll do. I didn't want to keep these too long. Try to make them brief as possible. You know, this is probably almost like 2 hours, so I don't want to go over 2 hours. So all praise to the Most High. Again, Ko Tehalim Ko Kabo Wahati Feret Yahweh Avinu Eloheinu. Right? Um, Got to get back to loving one another in sincerity. Love covers a multitude, and when we love the Most High, we're gonna love the Most High enough to shed off the old man and be willing to put on the new man, be born again with water and spirit, born again with the power, with the spirit of the Most High Yahweh Elohim, to get up out of the deep depths of this Greco-Roman Western culture we've been assimilated into, so that we can start living and thriving in the blessings that the Most High put forth. Right? That's what this is about. Um, Not gonna be too much more long-winded. I want to say I love y'all. I love y'all with the love of the Most High. Hope you have a good and blessed, peaceful week. Hope you have a good evening, the rest of your evening. Um, May something I said just continue to encourage, build, and uplift. Take this back to the Most High Yahweh. Pray, meditate, and ask the Holy Spirit to lead and guide you into a sound conclusion. Right? Um, if I could, I'm gonna close out with the priestly blessing in Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 to 26. Yebarechacha Yahweh weishmaraka. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. Ya'er Yahweh panav elecha vihuneka. May Yahweh lift up his face toward you and show you favor. Yisa Yahweh panav elecha vayashem lacha shalom. May Yahweh lift up his face towards you and give you shalom. Wait a minute. Did I say that right? Okay, so 25. Ya'er Yahweh panav Yahweh. Yeah.
Give you peace. You got it. You got it.
Oh no, you good. You good. You good. I'm reading from here. It's just kind of small, but
Don't hurt my eyes.
don't hurt your eyes. Yeah, I'm reading from there. See.
Get it. All right.
So may Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make His face shine upon you and show you favor. May Yahweh lift up His face towards you and give you shalom. And I say shalom, shalom.
Shalom. Shalom.
Shaha wahabarim. Thank you, brother BA. Thank you, sister Yahara.
Thank you.
I'm out. If y'all got any more questions or concerns, just holler at me in the chat. Love y'all.
Shalom.
916 Sean in the building. All right.